I was just a young girl when my uncle moved in with my mom and me. This isn't one of those stories about a creepy uncle. It's about something else he brought with him, a computer. He was a huge technophile, which sucked me in completely. I became enthralled with the endless possibilities of the internet, and being in middle school didn't help. Immature and naive, I dove into anything that caught my eye. Suspicious ads, web-based games. Looking back, it's a shock I never got a virus. My uncle worked nights and slept days, so I had nearly free run of his computer. It wasn't long before I discovered what some consider the internet's biggest advantage: meeting new people. I joined a web-based game called Zwinky. Yes, that silly avatar site where you can dress up characters. I dove in. I made a group of friends and pretended to be older than I was. Who wants to friend a soon-to-be sixth grader? Among them was a young man who claimed to be a teenager like me. He said his name was Corey, and we became close fast. We clicked innocently. Bands, books, TV shows. Until he introduced me to darker things. He let me see pornography slowly at first, and in my eagerness to fit in as a mature member of the group, I developed a taste for it quickly. There's nothing inherently wrong with discovering sexuality, but the turn it took still bothers me. Over time, he sent me links to stories about rape and murder. That conditioned my young mind to tie those ideas to sexual curiosity, with my unwitting parents to tell me otherwise, given how he had taught me to be secretive with our online relationship. My morals slowly loosened into wanton desire. Next came the emo scene and the scars. He taught me how to vent myself with my body, how to cut, how to clean the wound so it wouldn't get infected, and, most important to him, how to photograph it at the right angle. We exchanged pictures of our mutilated skin, and as intimate as that was, I had no qualms about giving him my phone number. My home phone number. Told you I was immature and naive. So we continued, talking nearly every day under the pretense we were classmates. He claimed to be from London. His accent sounded British, but a quick check of his area code said Massachusetts. I never brought it up. Maybe my young mind had invested so much trust in him. All good things must end. One evening, my mother overheard part of a call while I was in the backyard, and she realized the conversation was inappropriate and that I had been lying about who I'd met. She confronted me. In tears, I admitted I'd met him online. Scared for me, she called whoever this man was and told him to never speak to me again. I cried for hours, terrified both of what my mother would think and of Corey, who I hadn't yet realized wasn't who he pretended to be. Then the calls started, at first a call or two. My uncle intercepted them and threatened to call the police. I don't know what Corey said. Then the calls escalated. Within a week, they were happening hourly until we had to disconnect our phone line. Just as we were about to change our number, the calls stopped. We felt relieved, but I remained grounded. Eventually, my parents got comfortable leaving me home alone again. One day, I was in the living room playing video games when the phone rang. I put a pause on my game and ran to the phone, thinking it was my mother checking in. It wasn't. My heart sank the moment I saw the caller ID. It was from Massachusetts. I let it ring out to voicemail. My hand shook as I listened to the message. A gruff male voice, nothing like the soft English voice I'd known, said 4 words: "She will be mine." I panicked and deleted the message. I never told my parents. I felt that terrible little piece of information was mine alone. Too terrifying to share. A year later, we moved houses for unrelated reasons. A full year passed without incident until my birthday. I had mostly buried the memory. Early one morning, I was in the kitchen grabbing a drink and scanning for any presents my mom might have left out. Then the phone rang. My glass nearly slipped from my hand when that old caller ID blinked on the dim screen. This time, the gravelly voice left only 3 words: "Happy birthday." This happened 4 years ago on my 16th birthday. It wasn't my first time being admitted to a mental hospital, and after this I made sure it was my last. The day before, I'd had a breakdown and attempted suicide by hanging myself. I was unsuccessful, and my family took me to the place I knew all too well. The hospital itself is like a boarding school. The best way I can describe it. It was very modern, with a gym, a classroom that actually made you feel like you were in school, and a living area with couches and a TV. The staff wanted the patients to feel at home since some of them were going to be there for months at a time. My admissions usually went smoothly. Get admitted, get my treatment plan, meet my roommates, get discharged a week later. But this time was different for multiple reasons. 1, I was going to spend my sweet 16 there. 2, well, I'll get to reason 2 soon. On my first day there, I met my roommates. For their privacy, I'll call them Hannah and Val. Hannah was your typical punk chick who'd been admitted for an accidental drug overdose. She almost drowned in her vomit. Val, she was different. She always had her head down, but even with her head down, I could see cuts all over her face. They didn't look intentional, like self-inflicted wounds. They looked like someone had fought with her and scratched her face with long nails. Val never talked. She always stood by the barred window staring outside. That first night we picked beds. Hannah chose the one closest to the door, I picked the bed in the center, and Val picked the bed closest to the bathroom. During the night I felt like someone was staring at me, like their eyes were boring into the back of my head. Rolling onto my right side, I saw Val sitting at the edge of her bed, staring at me intensely. "Are you okay?" I asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she got up and walked into the bathroom. I shrugged it off and went back to sleep. The next day, I sat with Hannah in the living area watching TV. Val was missing from the group as everyone else emerged from their rooms. Thinking she'd slept in, I decided to check on her. I opened the door to our room and found Val sitting on her bed with her back to me. When the sound of the door closing echoed through the room, Val suddenly put her head up and stuffed something under her pillow. Not really worrying about it, I told Val to come with me and the rest of the group. The only response was an eerily slow turn of her head as she glared at me. Taking that as a no, I went back to Hannah. When I sat down, she had a disturbed look on her face. "What's wrong?" I asked. Hannah looked at me and said, "Aaron." Aaron was another patient. Overheard the nurses talking about Val, she continued. "She's being moved to solitary either tomorrow or the next day." "Why? What did she do?" "She doesn't even talk," I replied. "Apparently she's here because she murdered her brother's rabbit and threatened to eat its insides. All because her brother read her diary." I stared at her, shocked. "Why isn't she in solitary now?" "Well, I didn't finish," Hannah said. When her brother came into her room to find his dead rabbit, Val attacked him with a knife and tried to bite his ear off. The disgust on my face must have been obvious because Hannah looked disgusted too. Later that night, when everyone was required to go back to their rooms, I hesitated to open the door to ours. Walking in, I was relieved to see Val asleep. Hannah and I got into our beds and fell asleep. This was supposed to be the day I celebrated my sweet 16, but here I was in the cafeteria being sung to by hospital staff with a stale chocolate cupcake in front of me. My only wish was to be visited by my parents, but it was a Tuesday and not a visiting day. Hannah and the other patients pitifully said happy birthday to me throughout the day. So far, the day was normal, except for the birthday part. Val had been missing all day. Hannah and I assumed she had been transferred to solitary. Hopefully that was the case. Around 3 p.m. it was break time and we could go back to our rooms to rest. To kill time, I decided to take a shower. The bathroom entrance was a green curtain. Inside were a toilet and sink. No mirror, probably a hazard. And a shower small enough that moving around was almost impossible. I turned on the water, stripped down, stepped in, and closed the curtain behind me. I started singing a tune to myself, not caring if I was off-key since no one else was in the room. A few minutes later, I heard a thump outside the bathroom. I called Hannah. "I'll be out in a few," but got no response. Another minute passed and I noticed the curtain outside the shower moving. Before I could process what that meant, the shower curtain was ripped open. I screamed when I saw Val's scratched face as she reached into the shower to choke me with one hand. In the other, she held a toothbrush fashioned into a shank. I grabbed her wrist, trying to stop her as she lunged the shank toward my neck. Her hand tightened around my throat and my grip began to loosen. The homemade knife edged closer. With the strength I had left, I kicked her with my right leg. She pulled back, the hand on my throat loosened, and I yelled, "Help." In that instant, I felt like I was going to die. Val looked at me with the most evil expression I've ever seen on a person. I could read her mind for a second. She wanted to shove that sharpened toothbrush into my neck. She pulled her arm back and with all the force she had lunged to stab me again, screaming a sound that was pure madness. Just when I thought it was over, The door to my room burst open and 7 staff members tackled Val to the ground. Her head nearly slammed into the sink. For the first time, I didn't feel embarrassed that most of the staff who tackled her were male. After what I'd just gone through, it didn't matter. A female staff member handed me a towel. I stepped out of the shower and ran to her, hugging her and crying into her shoulder. Behind me, I heard wails and screams. The male staff dragged Val out of the room, and over the intercom I heard, "Code Gray." I smiled weakly. Code Gray meant solitary confinement and a sedative that would render you unconscious for the rest of the day. She needed that right then. My parents were informed of the incident and paid to discharge me early the next day for my safety. I don't know what happened to Val after solitary confinement. For all I know, she could be in jail for actual murder. For context, I'm from Germany and the legal age to drink here is 16 for beer and wine, and 18 for liquors. So on the day I turned 18, me and my best friend decided to go out to our nearest city to grab some drinks at a local bar. That is quite popular. But since it was a Tuesday night, on school summer break, there weren't that much people around, so we just enjoyed spending time together, meanwhile sipping some margaritas. All of a sudden, the waitress, who I actually kinda know because she previously graduated from the school I went to, comes up to us, saying 2 men want to buy us a drink, pointing at a table at the other end of the outdoor section. At this time, it was around 10 p.m., and even though it was midsummer, it started to get dark. So we didn't really see what the guys looked like at first. We just thought, yeah, fuck it, why not, and went over to thank them. At this time, I recognized that they were a younger-looking guy, in his early to mid-20s max, and a middle-aged man that was obviously already intoxicated. The younger guy, let's call him Tom, asked us to take a seat, and since he seemed like a nice guy that wanted to chat, we agreed. So as we were talking, getting to know each other a bit, I noticed the older guy intensely staring at me, like he didn't even blink. I looked at him as I noticed him, and it was then when he said, "How old are you? You are so beautiful, do you even know how beautiful you are?" I told him I just turned 18, laughed it off, clearly being uncomfortable, and thanked him for the compliment, since I knew he was clearly drunk, and tried to change the topic. As we were talking about life in general, Tom tells us that the older guy is actually his neighbor, who is currently going through a divorce, and so he wanted to distract him with a night out. We thought it was sweet of him to help this guy going through a hard time. Then he mentions his neighbor is an architect, encouraging him to maybe talk about his interesting profession rather than creeping on a freshly 18-year-old, because at this point he was constantly interrupting our conversation to tell me kinda inappropriate things like how sexy and special he thought I was. Then the conversation turned dark real quick. The guy started to talk about how he doesn't seem to have any sense in life anymore, and that he wanted to kill himself. I also struggled with a lot of depression since I was a child, so I wasn't super freaked out. I was more like feeling sad for the guy and tried to calm him a little bit, while texting my best friend that was just seated next to me on how we can maybe get out of that situation. But then he said, "I can't, I just want to end it. I have a knife on me right now, I'm going to do it right now." Threatening his life, kind of begging us to tell him a reason to not just fucking commit suicide right in front of us. Tom at this point just started to apologize and to calm him down. Didn't really work. I mean, I felt sad for the guy, but we just met him maybe 1 to 2 hours ago, and you never know what an intoxicated man that claims he has nothing to lose, that also carries a knife on him, is capable of. Me and my best friend, being scared now, come up with a plan over text to fake a call from some male friend of ours we wanted to meet up. So she changed my name in her phone quickly to a guy's name, and so I called her, while hiding my phone in the pocket of my vest. And let me tell you, this bitch performed the most realistic fake phone call I've ever witnessed. So good, actually, that for a moment I was like, wait, is she really calling me or did she find a friend to call? At that point, the man is just begging us not to go, making us even more uncomfortable. But we just apologized ourselves, and as we were about to leave, Tom asked me for my number. I wanted to leave quickly, so I gave him my number, which he called immediately to make sure it was legit, of course, but blocked him right after he texted me. It was New Year's Eve, my birthday, and two friends and I were out the front of my house listening to music on my iPod. We were about 12 at the time and there was no one else around. It was probably 10 to 10:30 p.m., and we were waiting for the illegal fireworks to go off down the street. They happened every year at this time. It probably sounds a little weird. 12-year-old kids by themselves at 10:30 p.m. listening to Katy Perry in the middle of the street. But it wasn't too unusual. See, my neighborhood is very close. We know all of our neighbors really well, so our parents, who were in the house, and we weren't at all concerned. We were listening to Hot and Cold by Katy Perry. Yes, it was that time of the decade. And we were jamming along when we began to hear a whistle. At first it sounded like it was part of the song, so everyone ignored it. That was until it started to distort and go out of rhythm with the music. It didn't seem to be in tune with the song, and it was eerily out of pitch. Maybe to hear it better, my friend paused the music. Maybe it was just in the song, or maybe the phone was glitching. As soon as the music stopped, the whistling continued, pitchy and slow. We were a little spooked. It was dark outside aside from a few streetlights. We couldn't really see much in the darkness other than the strange whistling. We were able to pinpoint the direction it was coming from soon enough. We turned toward it and froze. About 10 meters from where we stood, just on the edge of the street lamp's light, was a man. He looked quite disheveled, most likely homeless, and he was just standing there looking at us and whistling that godforsaken, pitchy whistle. We all stood frozen for a while, caught off guard. Then fight or flight kicked in. I yelled at my friends to get inside. They screamed and ran up the driveway. I shoved them forward, terrified that they might not have heard the whistling. The whistling finally stopped, but something else drowned out the silence. Heavy footsteps. He was chasing us. I screamed, flung open the front door and shoved them inside, not caring if I hurt them. I turned and slammed the deadbolt just as he reached the screen door. I watched his figure come into view, dirty, wearing soiled, long-sleeved clothes, an unkempt beard, and a torn beanie. As I closed the door, he stopped just ahead of the screen, looked me dead in the eye, and murmured something that still makes my skin crawl. Damn it. One friend consoled the other, who was in tears as I watched him through the peephole. He lingered a second more, then disappeared into the darkness. My friends asked if I was okay and pointed to my hands. I was shaking like a leaf. We never told our parents. This was over 10 years ago, and it still gives me the heebie-jeebies to think about what would have happened if we hadn't noticed that out-of-place whistling.